This month, as we celebrate Black History Month, we are taking a deep dive into the ways in which love shows up for us, in us, as us. A couple of weeks ago, Reverend Shannon, at the beginning of the month, taught us that the same stardust that lives in you lives in all of us, all of us. And when we remember that, it makes love the easy choice. Last week, we talked about how when we let love enter the room first, when we let it make way before us, it makes choosing love the easy choice. So today, we're going to talk about how wisdom informs love. And that's wisdom with a capital W. That's that sacred knowing that makes room for love to have its way in our lives and in the world. So every time you hear me say wisdom today, imagine it with a capital W. It's beyond knowing, it's wisdom. And we're going to talk about what that means. The Greek and Roman goddesses of wisdom, of course, were Athena and Minerva. And Sophia was considered the embodiment of all wisdom. In the Hebrew and Christian Bibles, wisdom is usually portrayed as feminine, and action is usually portrayed as masculine. And that is a human old paradigm of consciousness that we have all come from and that we are even now evolving out of. And so I think there's actually a lot of value to look at that paradigm of consciousness, of wisdom and action, of feminine and masculine. Of course, we know this has nothing to do with gender. This has to do with how we used to tell stories about how things work. Wisdom is neither feminine or masculine or both or neither. That's not what this is about. And that is a paradigm that we're living out of right now. What an interesting time in history we're living in, isn't it? So, I want to start today by taking a look at the Hebrew Bible, specifically the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs is considered to be mostly the work of King Solomon. There are other people who wrote in Proverbs too, and nobody knows exactly who wrote what. But in general, this is considered the work of King Solomon. And King Solomon was, if you'll remember, the wise king. Do you know why he was the wise king? At the very beginning of his reign, he got down on his knees and he prayed a prayer and he said, "Give me wisdom to lead my people." And the story goes that wisdom was granted. And now we have all kinds of stories in Proverbs about the wisdom of Solomon, don't we? So the book of Proverbs is some of his wisdom written in short bursts of inspired poetry. Really, really beautiful stuff. I want you to listen to this piece I'm going to read you, which is written from the point of view of wisdom herself. It's as if wisdom herself is telling her version of the story of creation. And this is found in Proverbs chapter 8, verses 22 through 31, okay? So, Elohim, or God, Spirit, Universe, El, possessed me at the beginning of his way before his works of old. I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning, before the earth ever was. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no fountains abounding with water, before the mountains were settled, before the hills, was I brought forth. While as yet he had not made the earth, nor the fields, nor the first parts of the dust of the world. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he set a compass upon the face of the deep, when he established the clouds above, when he strengthened the fountains of the deep, when he gave to the sea his decree that the waters should not pass his commandment, when he appointed the foundations of the earth, then I was by him, as one brought up with him, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him, rejoicing in the habitable part of his earth, and my delights were with the children of humankind. How many of you have heard the creation story told this way? Okay, Reverend Shannon. And our professor of feminism, Jen Moore. Besides them, who has heard the story of creation told from A, that it wasn't just an action that happened, but that there was wisdom, the embodiment of wisdom happening at the same time? I hadn't. In this passage, we can see how the masculine action and the feminine wisdom worked together, played together, celebrated together. But before anything was created, wisdom was brought forth first. Wisdom precedes creation. I think this is an important consideration both for our own lives and for the way that we interact in our relationships with each other, in the community. Before we go to doing, before we have that difficult conversation, before we decide what foods to put in our bodies that will nourish us, before we decide, do I pay off that credit card or put that money in this investment, before we vote, what if we just take a pause and go to wisdom first? What would that look like? In Buddhism, wisdom is sometimes called the self-secret. The self-secret. And it's not a secret that we keep from everybody else. It's a secret that we keep from ourselves. And so we spend our lives looking for truth, looking for knowledge, looking for wisdom. And all the time, surprise, it was here. It was within all the time. But it's up to each individual to find it within themselves. Each of us has to find that. The Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche, I've had the honor of being in the same room with him. He's an incredible, incredible man. He's a celebrated teacher of Buddhism, and he said, Buddhism teaches that this basic wisdom, called Buddha nature, is in every being, no matter what the appearance to the contrary. Deep in their hearts, there is a soft spot, compassion, wisdom, an ability to love called wisdom. He says, wisdom is the insight and understanding that comes from our hearts. Wisdom is compassion. It is genuine love, genuine caring. That is a very different definition of wisdom than the one that we tend to consider in our Western culture. That wisdom is something of the head. According to Rinpoche, wisdom is of the heart. It is compassion. It is love. Now, I want to be really clear. Knowledge is important. I love learning. We spend so much of our lives accumulating knowledge about the world, knowledge about ourselves. You have knowledge that I don't have. I probably have some knowledge that you don't have. And when we can each contribute to a shared pool of knowledge, humanity is gratified. Like, it makes us better. It brings us to peace. One of the basic ways of having a hard conversation is that first you create a shared pool of knowledge. Where are we starting from together? What do we already know? And when we can move from that shared pool of knowledge, then suddenly we're working side by side with someone, not fighting someone over what is right and what is wrong. Contributing to a shared pool of knowledge is one of the ways that science is having some of the biggest breakthroughs ever right now, because our computers and our servers have gotten fast enough to where scientists from across the globe contribute to a shared pool of knowledge and have all of this information available at their fingertips now. It's moving at such a fast pace. Knowledge is important. And knowledge Happens here. Wisdom is different. I've come to see that wisdom shows up in 3 different ways. It shows up in mind, it shows up in heart, and it shows up in body. Wisdom shows up in mind as that still small voice of knowing. You may hear it as actual words. Sometimes I do. You may hear it as just like an innate understanding of what action to take or what action not to take, but there's definitely a mind component to this kind of wisdom that we're talking about. Wisdom shows up in the heart, that heart knowledge of compassionate caring. Wisdom shows up in the body as that gut feeling you get when something feels wrong. And how many of us were taught to ignore that feeling and just go with the flow? It'll all be okay if you just put your faith over here. No. That gut body wisdom also shows up as heart opening when something is right. You do know. Wisdom speaks to us through every single avenue of reception that we will give it. If we're willing to provide an avenue, it'll try and get in there and speak to us. Interestingly, there's another quality of human life that shows up in the exact same way. It's intuition. Intuition speaks to us through that mental knowing, through that emotional wisdom, through that body sensation, that sense of knowing. Our intuition is our wisdom. I started to think about how maybe, how wetness is how we experience water? Like maybe wisdom is the experience of intuition. I just said that backwards. I'm thinking it through as it's coming out my mouth, and it's wrong. So we're going to back up. It makes more sense if I say that intuition is our experience of wisdom. And where does the wisdom come from? Where does it come from? All of these avenues of reception that we're talking about. Is it because we need to be an antenna for something that's going to beam itself to us at some mysterious time? No. It's already here. We already have it. We already are it. There is a beautiful quote I found by the incredible teacher, Howard Thurman. And it goes like this. There is something in every one of you that waits and listens for the genuine sound in yourself. It is the only true guide you will ever have, and if you cannot hear it, you will all your life spend your days on the ends of strings that somebody else pulls. You're not an antenna. You're not a string to be pulled. There is something in you that is all ears, just waiting for that intuition, your inner knowing, for wisdom itself to speak. And it is this knowing, it is your innate wisdom that is the genuine sound that is being listened for. This truth that rings through you. That's something we say, isn't it? It has the ring of truth for me. Because it does, it rings through you. And according to Howard Thurman, it is the only guide you will ever have or need. So why is this important? Why is it important for us to embrace the wisdom of our intuition? Intuition comes from the same Latin root as tuition, to teach. Intuition is your inner teacher. It is your inner guide. And when we can become students at the feet of that inner master, we are primed to grow and to serve in meaningful ways. The opposite of sitting at the feet of that master is being in bondage by fear. We get to choose. There's a difference between serving from the ego and serving from wisdom. Y'all know I'm a big fan of ego. Bless the ego, it keeps us alive. Without it, we would be really messed up. The ego is really, really important. Also, it makes sure we all put our clothes on before we leave the house, and I'm really grateful for that. However, there are things that the ego is really good at, and there are things that it's really bad at, and sometimes it likes to take over all the jobs. All the jobs. So when we flip that script and we start acting from wisdom, that means we're fully connected to our divine guidance. Did you know that your highest wisdom self is within you already? And you are fully connected to it. When we give from that place of wisdom, we give graciously with no expectation of return, because we know that whatever we put out, whether that's work or words or money, whatever we are putting out there is divinely guided, and it goes forward and makes its own way, directed by Spirit. We don't have to tell it what to do or how it's going to come back to us and show up. We give without expectations when we give with wisdom. When we serve from a place of wisdom, we serve not because we're afraid of what will happen if we don't, or because we think, I must come in and save this situation. I know nothing about that, Roxana. Don't laugh at me. No, we serve because that innate wisdom within us is showing up and saying, this is where your gifts, your unique, perfect, talented self is being asked for, right here. We serve because it's the fulfillment of our soul purpose, you see. You see the difference. When we set aside all of the things that we think we know in favor of that wisdom, that genius of our intuition, everything changes. Everything. And as I have played with this in my own life, I'm here to tell you that as I do this, not only do I mess up less, because I'm not making decisions from fear, I'm making decisions from love. So I'm contributing not only to the shared pool of knowledge in the world, but to the shared pool of love in the world, simply by listening to my inner wisdom. In The Naked Now, the wonderful Richard Rohr said, we need true mystics who see with all three sets of eyes. That's the mind, the heart, and the gut wisdom, right? We need true mystics who see with all three sets of eyes, not eccentrics, fanatics, or rebels. The true mystic is always both humble and compassionate, for she knows that she does not know. She knows that she doesn't know. But I don't need to know. Remember that one? Where the wind blows, 'cause God knows. I don't have to know. I don't have to know if I'm hurt by someone and I do my forgiveness work, what that does is it frees me from having to know or be attached to what retribution looks like, what their karma is. Ugh. That's not my business. That's not my business. My business is to love and love and love again. And listen, I'm not asking you, Richard Rohr is not asking you, Howard Thurman is not asking you to give up all of your hard-earned knowledge. Your knowledge is important. It's valuable. But what I'm asking you to do is to put it in the right place, to right-size it, to make that knowledge the servant of your life, not the master of your life. I'm asking for you to allow your important knowledge of the world and how it works to be in service to the wisdom of your intuition. Your knowledge is going to tell you the what. That is a very interesting color of orange. That's the what, right? Your intuition is going to tell you the what to do about it. Your knowledge is going to tell you what it is, but your intuition is going to tell you what to do about it. Your knowledge might tell you how to do the doing, or to go to the YouTube and find out how to do the doing, because thank goodness for repair videos on the YouTube. But your knowledge may tell you how. You may have the knowledge of how, but your intuition is going to tell you how to be the sacred being that you were put here on the planet to be. Knowledge asks the question when, but your intuition is the exact knowing of when to act and when to take that sacred pause. You see, it's about right-sizing them and knowing, having the emotional and spiritual capacity of recognizing which one we are behaving from. In the beginning, God brought forth wisdom first. And just like in that creation story, knowing and creation, action and wisdom go hand in hand, and you really shouldn't try to have one without the other. But the sacred knowing, the wisdom, comes first. We have just entered the season of Lent. The beautiful 40 days. Did you know it's 40 days minus Sundays? So it's actually 46 days, I'm learning. I grew up evangelical. We didn't do Lent. And so I'm learning all kinds of things about Lent. But in all of my research, I've learned that Lent is actually a practice that started in the very, very, very early days of the Christian movement in honor of Jesus, who went to the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights to get his mind straight before he went into ministry in the world, before he went to do his work in the world. He went to get his mind straight. He went to connect in with that inner wisdom and to make sure that what he was doing was in alignment with his sacred purpose. And very, very, very early on in the Christian movement, there's a letter from the first century saying, from a disciple, not a disciple, from a follower of Christianity whose grandfather was a disciple and whose father and then was a follower, and then he was a follower. And he said, in my grandfather's time, we did this practice of Lent. So this is early. So this goes back 2,000 years. And it's interesting to me that with all of the changes in the world and in religion over 2,000 years, Lent has very much stayed the same. The idea behind it is that you fast from something or you give up something. And whenever you feel that hunger or that desire to reach for that thing, you reach within instead and you get your mind right about what's important. It's a really beautiful idea. You know, we've done fasting. We've done an abundance class sometimes over Lent about fasting from lack consciousness and about noticing when those thinking thoughts of lack come up, whether it's about time, money, or love, noticing when those thoughts come up and turning back to the truth. This is what Lent is about, noticing when you're missing something and turning back to the truth. I believe, for me, I have reached a point in my own growth, and I'd like for you to consider this. I'm not so much interested in learning through pain and deprivation anymore. Am I right? I feel like the idea of giving up, fill in the blank. I don't know, what do people give up? Alcohol, I already gave that up. Chocolate, I gave up sugar too. What have you given up for Lent? Swearing. Criticism. social media, do a technology fast. What did you say, liver? Did somebody say liver? I gave that up for Lent. Right? So the thing that I'm going to ask you to consider is that you think about, maybe if you want to, over the next 40 days, choose something, whether it's lack thinking or criticizing. I was thinking this morning, I was thinking about giving up unasked for advice. You have. What about evidence? Giving it up? No, we don't want too much evidence out there, do we? I was thinking about, I saw a post and it said that unasked for advice is secretly criticism. That one hit me because I have daughters. Right? You know? Yeah. But pick a thing, whatever that thing is. I've been noticing lately that that anything that comes out of my mouth about lack has to do with time. And you know, lack consciousness is lack consciousness. It don't have to be about money. It can also be about time, or it can be about love, or just enough. I don't have enough. Mine is showing up as time lately. So my practice up until Easter, right? When we get to be born anew in the light and get to be our reborn selves in spring without pantyhose. The practice becomes when I hear myself speaking lack, thinking lack, analyzing my calendar with that feeling. You know that feeling. For some of you, it's doing your checkbook and that feeling. You know, whatever it is for you that brings up that feeling, to stop and get your head on straight. Right size it. Remember who you are and whose you are, that you are a divine purpose on this planet, and that it is right that you are supplied. And that when you begin to make those decisions from a place of wisdom within yourself, there is no lack there. You see, the moment you allow your spiritual practice to turn you away from the experience that you're having to the truth of yourself, suddenly options open up. That intuitive wisdom that we were talking about, it also shows up as the right person at the right time, the right investment at the right time, the right person canceling an appointment at the right time. That inner nudge to know not go out with your girlfriends tonight. It's a sit on the couch night, right? That knowing of, do I just push through and go to work, or do I go to the couch with my Kleenex? You know? But you know. It's already within you. And for some of us, and I can say this is true for me, I was very much raised in a world where I was supposed to ignore my wisdom and put my faith in the authorities out here. And so I've had to learn to trust it. Oh, how often does it all come back to trust? How often do we have to learn to trust ourselves? You know, but it's there. It's there. And the more we rely on it, the more it becomes a muscle that we can use. And here's the other thing. It's also important to not kick ourselves too hard when our guts say go left and we go right and hit a brick wall. You know? It's okay to learn as we go, but the invitation is to practice, practice, practice. For my children, I started very early when we were in the car, and it was a low stakes moment, like we weren't late for church. I would ask them, which way do you think we should go? Left or right? And just give them the opportunity to just check in. Just check in with their innate wisdom and start to kind of stretch that muscle a little bit. How did it feel when you were alone in the room with that person? Did you feel safe? You know, give them the opportunity to exercise, to befriend their feelings, their knowing, and their body wisdom. The way that we do this is the work in consciousness that we do through prayer, meditation, contemplation, all of those beautiful spiritual practices that we teach and that we practice around here help us to listen. And when we access our intuition that way, then it's a spiritual practice doesn't require deprivation, it requires dedication. And this is how we come to know ourselves and have the courage to act on that knowing. So this week, the invitation is to let intuition, that wisdom within you, guide you in all you do, because that still small voice of intuition, well, that voice, my friends, is love itself. That is the love. And it is guiding, guarding, and directing you in all you do. I